Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala nabi ummi. Last week we had read the quotation of the Shaykh Ibn Ata'ullah Iskandari rahmatullah alayhi, in which he had mentioned, where is it? Anta hurrun mimma anta anhu ayis. You are a free man in comparison or with regards to those things that you have no hope for or you have lost hope in. So if I don't have any need for something, then I'm free of it. I don't need it, I'm not a slave of it. And then he mentions وَعَبْدٌ لِمَا أَنْتَ فِيهِ طَامِعٌ, and you are a slave to whatever you are greedy towards. So there's a beautiful story, we'll get straight to that. When Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Maghribi, who used to live on the eastern part of Alexandria, he mentions one year I went for Hajj, and when I had finished Hajj, I intended to go back to Iskandaria, Alexandria. And then he mentions, I had this inner yearning and a call that told me that you will be back next year for Hajj. So he started talking to himself and thinking that I shouldn't go back all the way home. I should stop by somewhere closer so I can make it back for Hajj. So he mentioned he went to Yemen, which will be closer, and he says within Yemen he went to Aden, and he says one day I was sitting by the shore, so I saw people of the world making money. There's businessmen all over the place selling things, and saw another man miraculously doing some worship, and he witnessed a bit of a miracle on that person's part. So he thought to himself that lam asluh lidunya wala lil akhirah. I'm not good for dunya or akhirah. I suck at both. Meaning the businessmen are making good money, and this religious man, he's worshipping so beautifully. I'm good for nothing, basically. So he had this inner calling that said, whoever is no good for dunya and no good for akhirah, he's good for us. Meaning that once you feel like you're good for nothing and you have no inner perfection and you're not worth more, you're just very basic, that is when you have realized, sorry, let me clear my throat. I had a long day, spoke a lot, we had some meetings, so I'm kind of tired. So once a person realizes that they are very basic, that's when they have hit diamond and they have hit gold, because now Allah can bless them, and that blessing will not spoil them and will not give them pride and arrogance, because whatever extra new blessing that comes their way, it will not spoil them. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the person for great things, it will not change him, because he knows at his very core he's not much, he's just a very basic person. So may Allah make it easy for us to think about ourselves in that way, where we think of ourselves as very basic and nothing special. And then here it gets a little tricky. He says the types of servants of Allah, there's three types initially. The people that are going to end up in Jahannam, there's those who are going to end up in Jannah, and then there's those who are the elite of the Jannatis. So as for those who are the elite, he further divides them into two types. So I hope you're paying attention. He says those who are people of sabr and those who are people of shukr. So you're going to have to decide where you fall into. So he mentions those who have been given ni'mats and blessings, and from the beginning they are very perceptive of that ni'mat, they're very grateful for it, they never abuse the ni'mat, and they're very grateful all the time, and they live a life like that. They don't end up abusing that blessing. Then there's those who are not so fortunate. They end up doing a bit of wrong, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts them through some difficulties, and then they make their way back after a bit of sabr, and then they become religious. And then the discussion comes up, who's better, the people who were good from the beginning through their shukr, or people who were put through sabr and then brought to goodness. And this discussion is not to be confused with the other discussion which comes up. Are the rich prophets, the kingly prophets, are they special? Or the poor prophets, are they special? So there the discussion is the poor prophets are better because they're going through more difficulties. So that is a different discussion. Here it almost sounds like the same discussion, but it's not, because we're talking about the common people and their journey towards becoming pious. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us to understand. And here there's another beautiful story that I'm going to finish off with. And the dars today is very short. And I would like to dedicate today's dars to Brother Tariq, who had come earlier, but I had gotten busy and I wasn't able to do the dars with him. So this is dedicated. May Allah give him all the rewards to Brother Tariq for this dars. So this is a story of a sheikh who mentions that he used to study his spiritual journey under another sheikh who was very poor and used to hunt or catch fish and live off of that and just do a lot of worship. So he says, once I decided to go to a different town. So when I went to the other town, before I went, the poor sheikh told me that once you make it to such a town, find so-and-so and say salam to him. So the person says, okay, sure. So he went to that town, and when he asked about that person in that town, he finds out it's a very well-to-do person, very financially well, he dresses very elaborately, has slaves working for him, not to say slaves were being mistreated, but they were working for him, and he had a lot of pomp and glory to him. So he says, we have this idea that people that are financially well-to-do and elaborate and so on, they would probably not be religious. So he's confused, like, wow, this person looks so posh. So is he really religious? He goes, I don't know, I'm having a hard time. But before he left, he said, you know what, my sheikh told me to say salam to him, so let me just go anyways. So when he comes inside his place of living, he's even more confused by the glamour in it. So he finally says salam to the sheikh and says, oh, so-and-so was saying salam to you. And the sheikh turns around and tells him, when you go back to that person, tell him he's too involved in dunya. Tell him he's too involved in dunya. Tell him to get rid of the dunya that is in his heart. And now this person is shocked, like, yo, you have so much more money and you're so posh, and now you're telling me that my sheikh in other town who's so poor, he has more dunya in his heart. So he went back to him, and when we went back, the sheikh said, what happened? He's like, oh yeah, I met him, I said salam to him, and then he goes, did he give you any message? He's like, no, he didn't say much. He's like, no, he must have said something. He's like, yeah, he said, you have to get rid of the love of dunya from your heart. And the sheikh became so sad and started crying and cried for a long time, and he goes, yeah, he is right, I have a little bit of dunya in my heart still. So although the one sheikh outwardly looked poor and had less dunya, but it seems he had more attachment and connection to the world still. And the other person who had way more money, but it wasn't in his heart. So may Allah give us tawfiq to understand the secrets and the mystery and the depth of our religion. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us to purify our inner beings, and may He make us of His friends. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبي الأمي.